The wind howled across the open training range, carrying with it the sharp scent of dust and oil. Targets were lined up in the distance, barely visible dots against the desert horizon. 13 soldiers had taken their shots. 13 had missed. The air felt heavier with each failed round, and the general's patience was wearing thin. He removed his cap, rubbed his temples, and scanned the line of shooters. Then, in a voice that echoed like thunder, he asked, "Any snipers here in this army?" Silence followed. No one moved. No one wanted to meet his eyes. Every soldier there knew the weight of that question. It wasn't about skill anymore. It was about pride. The general wasn't just disappointed. He was looking for someone who could prove that precision and courage still existed in that unit. Then, from the back of the group, a quiet voice spoke. "Sir, I can try." Heads turned instantly. It wasn't one of the sharpshooters, nor anyone in combat gear. It was a woman wearing a simple training jacket, her hair tied back loosely. Some soldiers chuckled under their breath. She wasn't even supposed to be in the competition, just a civilian weapons instructor who had come to observe. But the way she stepped forward, calm and unshaken, made even the general pause. "You think you can make that shot?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. She only nodded, adjusting the heavy sniper rifle resting on the sandbags. The weapon looked oversized in her hands, but her movements were steady, practiced. The general sighed. "Targets at 4,000 meters. No one's hit it today." She didn't respond. Instead, she closed one eye, breathed out slowly, and squeezed the trigger. The echo of the shot rolled through the valley, and then a faint metallic ping in the distance. Bullseye. The range went dead silent. The general stared, unsure if he'd imagined it. Before anyone could speak, she chambered another round and fired again. Another hit, then another. 4 perfect shots, one after another, each more impossible than the last. Soldiers exchanged stunned looks, their earlier laughter gone. The general finally stepped closer, voice lower now, almost curious. "Who taught you to shoot like that?" She looked up, a faint smile crossing her face. "Let's just say the army doesn't have a monopoly on discipline." And with that, the general realized this day wasn't over. It had just begun. The general kept his gaze locked on her, still trying to make sense of what he'd just witnessed. Around them, soldiers were murmuring in disbelief, trying to figure out who this woman really was. A few approached her rifle, checking the scope, the wind direction, even the bullet casing, looking for some trick or explanation. But there was none. Every variable said the same thing. She shouldn't have been able to make that shot. Yet she did, 4 times in a row. The general folded his arms. "What's your name?" he finally asked. "Lena," she replied simply. No rank, no title, just a name. Something about her calmness unsettled him. She wasn't showing off, wasn't proud or smug. If anything, she looked distant, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. The general motioned for his aide. "Pull her file," he said quietly, but the aide returned minutes later, shaking his head. "Sir, she's not in the system. No service record. Nothing." That's when the whispers started. Some soldiers said she used to train elite marksmen overseas. Others claimed she was part of a classified unit that no longer existed. A few even joked she might be some kind of legend brought back to test them. But Lena didn't react to any of it. She just cleaned the rifle, placed it back on the stand, and stood silently watching the horizon. The general approached again, lowering his tone. 4,000 meters isn't something you just learn. That kind of precision takes years. Lena gave a small nod. "Years, yes. And mistakes," she said softly, her eyes distant. There was something in her voice, not pride, but pain. The general noticed the faint scar running across her knuckles and the way her shoulders carried a quiet weight. Whoever she was, she'd seen more than she was willing to share. As the sun dipped lower, the general ordered the soldiers to reset the range for another round. But his focus stayed on her. He wanted answers, not just about how she hit the target, but why she'd even been there that day. Before he could ask, a sudden call came through his radio. "Sir, command wants you back at base. Urgent." The general hesitated, eyes still on Lena. When he looked back, she was already walking away, disappearing into the fading light without another word. That night, as the general reviewed the day's footage, he noticed something odd, a patch on her old jacket, barely visible. It wasn't standard issue, but he recognized the symbol immediately. And that symbol hadn't been seen in years. The symbol on Lena's jacket wasn't just any mark. It belonged to a long-disbanded unit known only in whispers as Spectre Division. The general hadn't heard that name in over a decade, but he remembered the rumors. Elite sharpshooters trained for impossible missions, soldiers who could strike from miles away without ever being seen. The division was supposedly shut down after an operation went wrong overseas, its members scattered and records buried. But if Lena wore that insignia, then someone had survived, and for reasons he couldn't yet see, she had chosen to resurface now. Sleep didn't come easily that night. The general replayed her shots over and over, watching her form, her breathing, her timing. It was flawless, too flawless to be random skill. Every movement had purpose, every pause had history behind it. The next morning, before sunrise, he sent a request for a background trace, even though he knew it would draw attention from higher up. Something about this woman didn't sit right with him, and he wasn't sure if she was a gift or a warning. Meanwhile, Lena was already miles away from the range, driving an old Jeep down a quiet desert road. Her expression stayed calm, but her mind was racing. She had hoped to stay unnoticed, but the general's reaction told her that her presence had stirred old memories. She wasn't supposed to reveal herself, not yet. But when she saw those soldiers struggling to hit the target, something in her couldn't stay silent. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe guilt. The last time she'd pulled a trigger at that distance, it hadn't been for practice. Back at the base, one of the younger soldiers, Corporal Mason, couldn't stop talking about her. "You saw that shot, right? She's got to be ex-Special Forces. No civilian can do that." His excitement made the others uneasy. "What if she's back for a reason?" Another whispered, "What if Command knows something we don't?" Rumors started spreading through the barracks, twisting and growing. By noon, the general received a coded message from headquarters. "Cease inquiry. Subject classified. Stand down." That only deepened his suspicion. Classified meant important, and important meant dangerous. He closed his office door, took a deep breath, and stared at the single still frame of Lena from the video, her eyes fixed on the horizon. He didn't know what she was looking for that day, but something told him the army wasn't finished with her yet. The general's office felt colder than usual that night. The only light came from the flickering screen in front of him, still paused on Lena's image. Her calm face stared back at him, unreadable. He'd seen many soldiers in his lifetime, heroes, liars, and ghosts, but something about her was different. She didn't fit anywhere, and that insignia on her jacket, the one belonging to Spectre Division, wasn't just a remnant of history. It was a message. Unable to shake the feeling, he made a quiet call to an old contact, Colonel Reeves, a man who had once overseen Spectre operations before they were erased from record. When Reeves answered, his voice was cautious, almost tired. "You shouldn't be calling me about this, General," he said before the question even came. "I just need to know if any Spectre agents are still active." The general pressed. Reeves hesitated. They were never officially disbanded. They just vanished. Some went underground. Some disappeared for good. But if you saw the mark, it means one of them wants to be found. Then the line went dead. The general leaned back, the weight of those words sinking in. Why now? Why reveal herself after all these years? He decided to review the rifle she'd used that day. When the weapons technician brought it in, they discovered something strange. The rifle wasn't Army-issued. It was modified with a precision scope engraved with coordinates. Not serial numbers. Coordinates. The general had them traced. The location was deep in the mountains, an abandoned Spectre Division training ground that hadn't been touched in years. Meanwhile, Lena arrived at a small cabin tucked among those same mountains. The air was thin, cold, and eerily quiet. She placed the rifle on a wooden table and pulled out a faded photograph. Her old team, back when the Spectres still existed. Her eyes lingered on one face in particular, a man standing beside her. The same man who'd once commanded the division. The same man who had vanished during their last mission. She took a deep breath, glancing toward the tree line as if sensing something there. She knew she wasn't alone. Back at base, the general geared up for a discreet mission, ignoring orders to stand down. He couldn't shake the thought that whatever was waiting in those mountains might change everything. As the helicopter lifted off into the night, the radio crackled once, an untraceable signal. A woman's voice came through softly. "You should have left it buried, General." And then the signal cut out. The general froze as the voice faded from the radio. It was unmistakably Lena's, but the tone had changed, colder, more calculated. She wasn't warning him out of fear. It sounded like a final caution, the kind given by someone who knew what was coming next. The pilot glanced over his shoulder, uncertain, but the general only nodded for him to keep flying. The mountains ahead looked dark and endless, shrouded in fog, as if the world itself wanted to keep their secrets hidden. When they landed near the old Spectre training ground, the silence was thick. The buildings were nothing but shells now, their walls cracked, roofs half collapsed. But the general knew the place too well. Underneath this forgotten camp were old tunnels, built to train operatives to survive without being seen. He ordered his small team to stay alert. They found fresh tracks near the entrance, boot prints, light but deliberate. Someone had been there recently. The general's instincts kicked in. "She's here," he muttered. As they descended into the tunnels, the lights on their helmets caught glimpses of names carved into the walls, names of soldiers long gone. But deeper in, new markings appeared, fresh chalk lines, a pattern leading them forward. Then, a faint hum began echoing through the corridor. Not machinery, a signal, a beacon. Suddenly, one of the soldiers stopped. "Sir, this isn't right. We're being tracked." Before the general could respond, a hidden panel clicked open beside them, revealing a terminal still running. On the screen, classified files flashed, Spectre Division mission logs. And there, among the listed names, was his own. The general's pulse quickened. He hadn't been part of Spectre Division, not officially. But according to the files, he'd authorized their final mission years ago, the one that led to their disappearance. He realized now why Command wanted him to stop digging. Lena wasn't the only ghost from that operation. She was the only one who came back. A soft sound came from the shadows. The general turned, flashlight sweeping the tunnel. For a second, he saw her, standing at the end of the passage, rifle slung across her back. "You finally remembered," Lena said quietly, her expression unreadable. The general took a step forward, his voice steady but low. "What did we do, Lena?" She looked at him, the light catching the insignia on her sleeve. "Not we, General. You." And then, before he could speak again, the tunnel lights went out. The tunnel went completely dark. And for a few seconds, the general could only hear his own breathing and the soft echo of footsteps circling him. His men whispered, trying to find their bearings, when a faint light flickered at the far end of the corridor. Lena stood there, illuminated by the glow of an old emergency lamp, her expression calm, but her eyes sharp and steady. "You don't remember, do you?" she said softly. "The last mission. The order that ended it all." The general's chest tightened as fragments of memory came rushing back. The Spectre Division hadn't vanished. They'd been sent on a classified operation he'd authorized himself. A mission so secret it was never meant to exist. But when things went wrong, higher command erased every trace of it. To protect the army. To protect him. "You gave the command to shut it down," Lena continued, her voice trembling now. "We were told to wait for extraction that never came. You left us out there." The truth hit him harder than a bullet. He had buried the operation in his reports, convincing himself that Spectre Division had been lost in an accident. But now, face to face with the woman he'd abandoned, denial was impossible. "I didn't know anyone survived," he said quietly, lowering his weapon. "Lena, I tried to." She shook her head. "You tried to forget." Before he could speak again, the tunnel lights blinked on one by one. Behind Lena stood two more figures, their faces half hidden but familiar, members of the old Spectre team. They had survived too. The general stepped back, realizing this wasn't just about revenge. It was about exposure. Lena placed a data drive on the terminal beside her. "Every mission, every cover-up, it's all here. The world will know what happened." He looked at her, torn between guilt and duty. "If that goes public, it could destroy everything we've built." She paused, her voice softening. "Maybe it's time to rebuild it right." The general nodded slowly, then reached out his hand, not to fight, but to surrender. But before he could speak again, an explosion rumbled above them, shaking the tunnel walls. The power cut out once more. Through the dust and chaos, Lena's voice echoed faintly. It seems someone else doesn't want the truth out either. And as the smoke cleared, the general realized they weren't the only ones down there. The dust settled slowly, filling the air with the scent of earth and smoke. The general coughed, waving his flashlight through the haze, searching for any sign of Lena. The tunnel had partially collapsed, but faint footsteps echoed somewhere deeper inside. He called out her name, but only silence answered. Then, out of the dim light, she appeared, limping slightly, one arm shielding her eyes from the falling debris. "They're trying to bury it again," she said, breathing hard. "Someone from command must have triggered the failsafe." The general nodded grimly. They'd rather destroy the truth than face it. Together, they helped the remaining soldiers back toward the surface, weaving through crumbling passageways until they emerged into the cold mountain air. Behind them, the entrance to the tunnels gave one final groan and collapsed completely, sealing the pass beneath the rock once more. For a long moment, no one spoke. The mountains were silent again, the horizon tinted with the first light of dawn. Lena stood beside the general, holding the small data drive in her hand. It was cracked, but the light still blinked faintly inside. She looked at it, then at him. "It's all that's left," she said softly. He met her gaze, the weight of years pressing down on him. "You can hand it over to command," he said quietly, "or you can walk away." Lena hesitated. "And what would you do if you were me?" He sighed. "I'd stop letting the past decide who I am." For the first time since he'd met her, she smiled, small, tired, but real. She slipped the drive into her pocket and turned toward the road. "Maybe some ghosts don't need to be buried," she said. "They just need to be remembered right." As she walked away, the rising sun glinted off the old Spectre insignia on her sleeve. The general watched her go, knowing he'd probably never see her again. But the truth she carried, and the guilt he'd carried for years, had finally found light. Back at base, the general filed one final report. Spectre Division, status. Unresolved. Then, he closed the file, removed his insignia, and stared out over the training field where it all began. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Some truths, he thought, aren't meant to destroy. They're meant to remind us who we were and who we can still be.